Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the video where I explain and show how I made these lovely little USB drives that I'm going to be selling my discography on. I figured I'd show a couple beauty shots first because it's always good to see the goods before you jump into the whole thing. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to narrate the video while everything's playing. So earlier this year, maybe it was last year, we had an arborist come out and take out some big branches on a maple tree that we had kind of sitting out in the yard for quite a while. And I've wanted to make this USB drive for a real long time, but I never really had the inspiration or kind of knowledge to do it. And this year I kind of just decided to jump into it and figure it out. I really like the idea of using just wood that's found around the house rather than going and buying lumber somewhere or find wood. Partially because I'm a cheapskate, but it's also really nice to have the kind of personal connection to what I'm working on. And thankfully, since these pieces are so small, I'm able to really kind of get a lot out of a little. And it's really nice to be able to work with something like this. And I should mention that I'm very much a beginner at all of this. So I know I probably did some things wrong, and if you're kind, please let me know what I did wrong in the comments. I know woodworking commentary can be sometimes a little harsh, but unfortunately it was getting very cold as I recorded this. I recorded this over, I think, 3 days, and it started snowing on day 2. So the blanks that I make are about 2 inches long, and I wanted to make sure that I had some extra to work with in the whole process. So this is basically what I'm doing is I'm just sawing off a particular log, and then I'm going to work on and kind of squaring it up into 4 blanks that I can use for these projects. And I was honestly really surprised that this wood works so well. I mean, it's just kind of old wood that's been sitting out, thankfully raised up a little bit thanks to the kind of just the brush pile in general, so it didn't get waterlogged. But just being able to just grab something like this and work with it was kind of a big joy. So yeah, I figured I would just square it off like this and then cut it into 4s and work on it from there. Oh yes, and I tried to clean up. My studio is very messy. For what it's worth, I don't really use the wood shop a lot. I've been getting better at it. And all the tools that I'm using, aside for some at the end, are all hand tools. I really wanted to try doing all of this by hand because I feel that it's really kind of valuable to have that personal connection to with what you're working with. I do have kind of a blank that I use as a reference, which is 2 inches long by 1 inch wide by 3/4 inch tall. This tiny planer. I think I got this off Amazon. It works surprisingly well, especially considering all of the pieces that I work on are very small. I really appreciate that whole thing. I will have a parts list of the things that I used in the video description if you're watching this on YouTube. You get the lovely police sirens of Minneapolis in the background. I try to make sure that everything's square, even though a lot of the cutting that I do kind of makes things not end up square. And like I mentioned, I'm still learning through this whole process. So there's a lot of things that I'll improve at as time goes on. And I think part of that is going to be cutting straight and especially sanding to make sure that things remain square, because these did not end up as square as I'd like. My razor saw. I love my razor saw. Again, a cheap Amazon purchase. Completely available to anybody. I think a lot of the tools that I use, seeing as that they are hand tools, it's very easy and very approachable for this project. And there's a lot of projects about making like a wooden USB stick like this, but a lot of them use like bisecting the wood and digging out the inside, whereas I really love the look of a single piece of wood. This is a tiny jig I made for miter cutting. Nothing fancy, but it gets the job done. Anyway, that's how I kind of prep the wood, and at this point, like, everything's prepared, so it's kind of moving on to the epoxy and some of the other stuff that's kind of ancillary to the whole process of shaping the wood. So when I recorded this, it was I think it had snowed the night, so it was like 40 degrees out. My hands were so cold. Taping this up is really important. This is something that it took a couple times to get right. The first one that I taped up half drained out before it hardened, so I have kind of like a USB drive that's half full, which is honestly a cool effect, but not what I'm looking for this project. So I kind of learned my lesson. Now I really tape it up, and I have these melamine boards that help keep it in place and keep it flush. Again, I bought this epoxy off of Amazon, and seeing as my projects are so small, these bottles will last a long time. I also realized for some reason I only gloved one hand, and the hand that isn't gloved is the one that's doing all the work, so that's probably a safety thing that I probably should consider in the future. Working with epoxy is fun. I know that there's not a lot, but there's some stigma when it comes to working with epoxy for like river tables and whatnot, and I don't really buy into that. I think that it's a cool medium to work on. You can see that the epoxy is already super thick just because it's so cold out. I hit it with the heat gun several times over the next hour just to make sure that it retained that right temperature while it was kind of setting that initial set. And once it kind of turned into jello, I brought it inside where it was warmer, but I can't do this inside because there's cats, and those cats would either make a mess or put cat hair in the actual epoxy. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to get the tape off. I don't have a belt sander. Yeah, I'm wearing gloves here because my hands were so cold. I tried kind of pushing it off with a chisel, and that kind of worked, but I felt like I started to damage the actual wood and things that I wanted to retain. So I decided against that after this push right here. I kind of chipped the wood there, and I was like, maybe I'll stop. So I went back to kind of sanding off the edges and cleaning things up that way, which works. It's just time consuming. But it's satisfying to work with hand tools. Like, I could probably get like a bandsaw or something, and that would definitely do the job. Maybe someday I will, but again, working with hand tools is really nice. Also, I sanded off the pinky of my glove while I was doing that. Learning. I marked the top there so I know which way faces what when I kind of plan the cap and everything else. But you know, it's all ready to go and bopping it together for fun, I guess. So now I find the center of this piece here. I find the center of both of them, and I kind of rough out the dimensions of the USB drive, which I'll get into a little bit later, I believe. My whole goal here is to make sure that both the hole I make for the drive base as well as the drive plug are both centered. So if they're both centered, I'm able to ensure that they kind of flush together once once everything's set up. And so this is the only power tool that I really used. And this could be done by hand. It's basically just kind of routing out a lot of the inner guts of that so I don't have to worry about it later, because the next step is to chisel it. These are very fine chisels that I got at Rockler. They're probably available online too. If they are, I'll put a link in the description. But God, they're so nice. I only stabbed myself once with them, not on this project, just in general. And oh boy, are they sharp. But it's so satisfying to just take out just the chunks that you need, and you have like this perfect rectangle that's left, and it's so nice. So this is me routing out the bass just to do the same thing. I didn't feel like it was necessary to show that. But, you know, testing along the way, making sure that everything fits together, and boop, it does. It's always really pleasant at this point to make sure it fits, and you flip the cap around just to make sure that it fits on both ways. Because the first one I did, it was like super crooked when I put it on the wrong way. So now it's everybody's favorite part, the sanding. I skipped over a lot of this, but I went from like, I think that's 80 grit to 100 to 150 to 220 to 330. And then I have one at 600, 800, and 1,000. But that's after 330, I think. And that's already starting to look pretty nice. You can see that it's not square though. So there it is after 1,000, and I have my micro mesh pads that go 1,500 up to 12,000. Again, I spare you that because this took about 45 minutes of sanding, if not longer, to get all the way up to 12,000. But gosh, it's such a really, yeah, my hand was so sore. It's like a mirror finish, and it's not even varnished. Not varnished, I put lacquer on it. Just some spray lacquer. I also chamfered the cap a little bit, and I don't know if I like that design. I think it looks neat, but I also like the really strong lines of just a square cap. So this is the other time I use power tools, just to sand the plastic case off a little bit, because there's, you know, traditionally you need something to grab, but in this case it's going to be embedded in the wood. I imagine this voids the warranty of the drive, but I also imagine that epoxying it into a block of wood also voids the warranty. So, you know, it's going to happen at some point. Just doing a little bit of 5-minute epoxy to, well, first of all, I put a magnet in the cap, which is what I'm doing right now. Boop. So I epoxy a small magnet in the cap. This is mostly just for if the cap kind of gets loose over time. It still has some kind of holding force. And then I put in some sawdust into the rest of the 5-minute epoxy just to help give it the color, because I try to fill in a lot of the voids that I left or possible mistakes in the actual chiseling part. And then, yeah, I mount the drive in there. And that is pretty much the whole project. Just got to let that dry, and then there's a little bit more cleanup, and then it's on to the computer. But I'm so happy with how this turned out. This is just a really fun project, and it's beautiful result. Even if it's not square, it's not perfect, but you know, art doesn't have to be perfect. I think that that's important. So yeah, this is me moving to my computer. I do a sanity check on the drive after I sand it down, just to make sure I didn't hit anything that was necessary. Like I just removed plastic and not like circuitry. But once I get it all finished, and then I just kind of have it ready to copy all the files over. And this is my whole discography. It is over 16 gigabytes. It takes a very long time to copy with USB 2, but I wanted to have something very special and unique and handmade for my discography, because it's just so special to me. And then I have a little surprise inside of here too, where it's just like, this was the initial design. The only thing that I didn't get to work was that little piece of metal embedded in the epoxy. And I know how to do it. It's just time consuming. And then just in case if you were curious, you can watch the video on the USB drive. So that's it. That's the whole thing. I am so pleased with how this turned out, and I'm experimenting and I'm learning and I'm growing, but just being able to try new things and make this work, it's just so special to me to be able to do this. And I hope the people that do buy the USB drive enjoy it beyond just the music that's on it, but also as a small piece of artwork that I made by hand from a branch. Yeah, it's pretty powerful for me. So thanks. Bye.